Welcome classic rock fans to the 10 best progressive rock albums of 2023. Welcome classic rock fans to the 10 best progressive rock albums of 2023. If you're new to this channel, please do click like, subscribe and check that notification bell. And stick around to the end for a few honourable mentions. Number 10 is the Flower Kings and Look At You Now. This is their 16th album, I believe. It's a wonderful collection of songs full of all those twists and turns and proggy digressions we've come to expect. Lovingly crafted, of course, by a fine bunch of musicians. It's hooky in its hookiness and it's symphonic in its sweep. It's also fairly accessible. There's no gratuitously long pieces here we've come to expect from this band, making it an ideal starter record for those who want to dip their toes into the prog pool that is this band. The songs seep seamlessly into one another, adding a fluidity to the whole tone of the album. It comes across as a continuous suite of music, which I think was the objective here. Number 9 is Yes and Mirror to the Sky. Yes presenters with some meticulously rendered pieces here, all overseen of course by Steve Howe, who's very much seized the reins of this band. It's an album where they have clearly responded to their critics and fans who felt that the previous two albums with John Davison were a little bit beige, shall we say. All Connected and Luminosity have a symphonic ebb and flow, sweeping dynamics and virtuosic playing. Steve Howe deliberately fashions a sound that harkens back to the classic days of Yes, but slightly punchier and more spacier, I think. Yet with enough prog meanderings to appeal to the Yes faithful and beard strokers amongst us. The highlight of this album is the opener, Cut from the Stars, a track written by John Davison and Billy Sherwood, I believe. Now, John Davison has taken a lot of flack over the years for daring to slide into John Anderson's loafers, but I think he comes to his own really on this album. My only criticism of this album is it seems that Jeff Downes, the keyboardist of course, was making the tea while the rest of the band were recording this record. All those overtly flamboyant keyboard flourishes that we've come to associate with the classic era, Yes, are definitely missing here. Number 8 is Comedy of Errors and Threnody for a Dead Queen. This album is made up of 3 extended tracks with shorter linking pieces. Summer Lies Beyond is evocative, with languid instrumentation, evoking a kind of a wistful nostalgia. It reminds me of bands like Camel, for example, or even some of Hackett's solo stuff. It's often built around the wonderful guitar stylings of Mark Spalding and the distinctive vocal style of Joe Kearney or Carney. You know, Neil Young once used the simile to describe Crazy Horse as like a condor soaring over a mountain range. I mean, you could argue this band lacks the equine grace of Neil Young's backing band, but they are a remarkable blend of Scottish neo-prog folk with even some medieval stylings there as well, definitely making them my cup of mead. Number 7 is Last Frederick and Fire for Tellinger. Those of you like myself who possibly goo and gush over Wobbler, a band that very much harkens back to that classic Yes sound, will enjoy this, I think. This, of course, is the debut solo album from Wobbler's Lars Fredrik Frøsli, I hope I've said his name right. And like Wobbler, it does harken back to that classic 70s prog. Lots of extended instrumental passages, fluty bits. It's every tanked-topped loon's wet dream, and as a tanked-topped loon myself, I think I speak fairly authoritatively on this. Also believe it's another one of those pesky lockdown albums, but overall it ain't half bad. This album is very spontaneous, it's like unpeeled prog. It feels very organic, mercilessly free of click tracks and all sorts of technological gadgetry. One can just salivate at the analogue hum of this album, the fizz of those valves, the fluty textures, the Mellotron, the Yamaha CP70s, the Mini Moog, not to mention a few dashes of Hammond organ here and there. This is the only Scandi prog album you'll probably need this year. It was actually conceived and sung in Norwegian, which is exactly as it should be, because if it was sung in English it would be far too accessible and wouldn't annoy the wife half as much. Number 6 is Solstice and Light Up. I think this album came out in January of this year, but it certainly deserves to be on this list anyway. It's a band that are very much defined as kind of neo-progressive folk, but nevertheless the prog handle sits very comfortably with them. A band that's very much seems to be wrapped around these days the wonderful vocal yearnings of Jess Holland. She certainly embellishes the sound of this band absolutely beautifully, and that's not to take anything away from the other people in this band who all perform magnificently. We get the big cheese of the band, of course, which is Andy Glass, whose wonderful guitar stylings often seem like a melding of Andy Latimer and Alan Holdsworth. And the rhythm section is pretty solid as well, built around Peter Helmsley and Robin Phillips. Jenny Newman certainly broadens the band's folk palette, shall we say, and that's to take nothing against the wonderful keyboard of Steve Daniels. If anyone doubts their placing on this list, go and check out their performance of Bulbul Terang. You can find it on YouTube. With its wonderful Eastern tones and sitar-like flourishes, it's bloody marvellous. Number 5 is Stephen Wilson's Harmony Codex. This is his 7th studio album. It's a rich sonic palette on this record, obviously influenced, I think, by those ambient electronic textures of bands like Tangerine Dream and Kraftwerk. It's a wonderful journey of experimentalism and sonic excellence. Like Peter Gabriel's I.O., I believe this was actually released sort of piecemeal, but nothing compares to actually sitting down and listening to the whole thing in its entirety. My favourite tracks on here are Inclination. There's a nice nifty intro and a throbbing rhythm to it. Floaty, reverb-drenched vocals, and lots of atmospheric texturing via this chiming piano. What Life Brings is a fairly accessible number on this album. The whole album, in fact, sort of floats by as a soundscapey electronic murmur. Another wonderful track on this is Impossible Tightrope. Love the strings intro, flitting between kicking drums and falsetto vocals. It's a varied and eclectic album with some wonderful guitar passages and some uber chill-out moments. Number 4 is Bruce Soord's Luminescence. This is an album by the Pineapple Thieves Big Cheese. The music is subdued and fits into that melancholic mellow that Bruce Soord does so well. Even more so than 2019's All This Will Be Yours. I adore the opening track Dear Life with Soord's delicate mewing vocals, accompanied by fingerpicked guitar and strings. I love the refrain, Don't Wish It Away. It's almost like a nod to mindfulness, or at least a warning as to avoid an unconsidered life. That's before we get to the electronic blueprint of Lie Flat. It's woozy stuff that has the listener floating around these strange ecosystems of guitar strummings, reverb and synth textures. Contemplative is probably the best adjective to describe this album. Quite sparse offerings at times, perhaps proving that less is indeed more here. So Simple and Nestle In, which I think was the second single, are the real standout moments on this album for me. And the orchestral closure, Fine Peace. It's a befitting end to a reflective album built around all these electronic ambient sounds and the acoustic guitar. James Taylor meets Mazzy Star. Number 3 is the band Kite Parade and their album Retro. This band are the brainchild of multi-instrumentalist Andy Foster. And if you're a fan of very hooky, melodic prog, then I think you're going to like this. This follows their critically acclaimed album The Way Home from 2002. As I've said, there's an emphasis on melodies and big choruses on here. And one can't help but marvel at the quality of the songwriting, the guitar riffage, and the brain wormery of the choruses, putting pay to the myth that prog fans just like fluty mellotrons and lots of extended fiddly diddly passages. Steve Thorne contributed to the lyrics of the final 2 tracks, and there's some great guitar work by Daz Atkinson. This album is a definite must for those of us who enjoy the more melodic end of the prog spectrum. More Purple Rain than Pawn Hearts. The opening track Retro reminds me of Rush, sort of circa Grace Under Pressure, lots of stabbing guitars and nice keyboard work. Number 2 is 7 Impale and Summit. This band hail from Norway, but we shouldn't hold that against them. Lots of jazz fusion-y stuff going on with this album. It explores what I would call the more darker shades of progressive rock. This album is a real progression, I think. I mean, especially if you listen to their debut album, which I think was City of the Sun. This sounds more mature, more accomplished, I think. On this record, the band regale us with 4 epic tracks, lots of jazz fusion-y stuff. One can hear the influence of King Crimson, Van der Graaf Generator, even Frank Zappa. I think the shortest piece on this album is about 9 minutes. This is their first album in a number of years. I don't know why there was such a break between the last one and this one. You're in for a real treat of the more epic, drawn-out numbers of Your Cup of Tea. It actually ends with a 13-minute piece. I love the slow piano start of The Hunter with its gloomy vocals, then the more sprightly Hydra with its more getting into more jazz-influenced territories here, I think. It's music that goes off on the odd tangent, but always coming back to the main theme, the transitions negotiated in a smooth and seamless manner. Sisyphus is a bit of an uphill struggle, but on the second or third listening you come to realise it's probably one of the standout tracks on this record. I love the delicate jangle of the instrumentation and the voice. This sounds not too dissimilar from Nick Cave. It fluctuates beautifully from the melodic to the cacophonous, something you could say about the whole album in fact. Number 1 for me is predictably Peter Gabriel's I.O. I'm thoroughly loving this album, particularly the Brightside mix. I don't want to talk too long about it as I've already done 2 reviews of this record. I'll put the cards up there for you. Nice blend of different textures. Panopticon reconnects us with a poppier sound, I think, but some darker themes explored, such as aging, mortality, all part of this wider meditation on the human condition. In terms of the 2 mixes, there's only subtle differences between them, a few little tweaks here and there. In the context of Gabriel's wider albums, this would rank fairly highly for me. I will be doing a Peter Gabriel worst to best ranking video in the new year, so make sure you stay tuned for that one. But this is definitely my number 1 prog album of 2023. So there you are, that's my top 10 prog albums of 2023, and as promised at the beginning of this video, a couple of honourable mentions. First one is Rock Flute by Ian Anderson, or Jethro Tull I should say. The reason the music is actually exquisite, the concept and themes are absolutely delightful and beautifully explored by Ian Anderson. The writing, as always, is just top notch. The only distracting feature on this is Anderson's voice now just sounds like a kind of a tuneful speaking as his voice is shot these days. This lends the music sometimes a bit of a droning quality. So there you are, that's my last video before Christmas, so make sure you have a damn good one. I'll just leave you with my closing salvo, which is, as you know, hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.